As an HVAC tech, I know when wiring doesn't belong. That's how I found the GPSTracker sewn into my $3,200 wedding suit with 847 location pings from the past 6 months. The alarm screamed at 5:30 a.m., cutting through the darkness like a blade. I rolled over, my shoulder protesting from yesterday's crawl through a restaurant's ceiling space. Kim was already up, of course, standing at the bathroom mirror with that precise routine she never varied. Coffee brewing downstairs, weather app open on her phone, checking the day's schedule like a general planning a campaign. Emergency call came in 20 minutes ago, I said, reading the text from Marcus Chen at dispatch. Restaurant freezer down since yesterday. They're bleeding inventory. Kim nodded without looking away from her reflection. Don't forget Giuseppe's at 4. Final fitting. Her voice carried that edge. Not angry, just managed. Everything had to align perfectly, every detail locked down. 6 weeks until our September wedding, and she'd been running point on logistics like it was a military operation. I pulled on yesterday's work shirt, the fabric still carrying the smell of refrigerant and attic dust. I'll be there. 4 p.m. sharp, Hank. The suit needs final adjustments. I know. I grabbed my toolbox from the kitchen counter, the familiar weight settling into my palm. 20 years of HVAC work, and the tools still felt like extensions of my hands. Multimeter, manifold gauges, refrigerant recovery unit. Everything I needed to diagnose what was probably a simple capacitor failure. Should be a quick fix. Kim was already dressed for her office job, coordinating some corporate event that required the same obsessive attention she brought to our wedding planning. Text me when you're done with each call, she said, not quite a request. I want to track your progress through the day. The van started rough in the morning cold, diesel engine coughing before settling into its familiar rumble. I'd loaded it the night before. Diagnostic equipment, replacement parts, recovery tanks. The restaurant was 40 minutes across town, and I knew the manager would be pacing by the time I arrived. Restaurants lived or died by their cold storage. Traffic was light at 6:30 a.m., just the early shift workers and coffee shop employees heading to their posts. I passed Giuseppe's tailor shop on Elm Street, the storefront dark behind its elegant display windows. Italian wool suits and silk ties, the kind of craftsmanship that costs more than most people's monthly rent. Kim had insisted on Giuseppe for my wedding suit. You only get married once, Hank. This needs to be perfect. The restaurant sat in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax office, the kind of place that survived on lunch crowds and dinner rushes. The manager met me at the back door, keys jangling in his nervous hands. Thank God you're here, he said, leading me through the kitchen. We've got 300 pounds of meat in that freezer, plus all the prep for today's service. If we lose it... I knelt beside the commercial freezer unit, already feeling heat radiating from the compressor housing. Classic signs of a failed capacitor. The motor was trying to start, but couldn't get the initial kick it needed. I clipped my multimeter leads to the capacitor terminals, watching the digital readout confirm what I already knew. Simple fix, I told the manager, pulling a replacement capacitor from my parts bag. Give me 15 minutes. My phone buzzed while I worked. Kim again. How's the first call going? On schedule for Giuseppe's? I typed back with greasy fingers. Almost done. On track. The new capacitor slid into place with a satisfying click. Connections tight and secure. I powered up the unit, listening to the compressor kick in with its healthy, steady hum. Temperature gauge already dropping toward normal operating range. That's it? The manager asked, watching the digital display. Sometimes the simple problems cause the biggest headaches. I packed my tools, checking the time. 8:15 a.m. 3 more calls before Giuseppe's, but all routine maintenance. I could make it work. The second call was an office building with a faulty thermostat. The third, a residential unit with a dirty filter. Basic stuff, the kind of work I could do in my sleep. By 3:30, I was washing my hands in a gas station bathroom, changing into the clean shirt Kim had insisted I bring. Giuseppe's shop occupied the ground floor of a renovated Victorian, all exposed brick and polished hardwood floors. The smell hit me as soon as I walked in. Pressed wool, cedar, and something else. Starch, maybe. The scent of old-world craftsmanship. Hank! Giuseppe emerged from behind the counter, his Italian accent thick as espresso. 60-something, silver hair perfectly styled, wearing a vest that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment. Right on time. Your beautiful bride, she is already here. Kim sat in a leather chair near the fitting area, her fingers drumming against a fabric sample book. She looked up when I entered, that quick scan she always did, checking my appearance, my punctuality, my readiness for whatever came next. The suit is perfection, Giuseppe continued, retrieving a garment bag from behind the counter. But we need the final measurements for the trouser hem. Very important, the proportions. He unzipped the bag with ceremonial care, revealing the navy suit Kim had selected after visiting 6 different tailors. The jacket hung like liquid shadow, the fabric catching light in subtle waves. Hand-stitched buttonholes, silk lining, details that spoke of hours of careful work. Try it on, Kim said, standing. Giuseppe needs to see how it hangs. I slipped off my work shirt, feeling suddenly underdressed in Giuseppe's elegant shop. The jacket slid over my shoulders like it had been waiting for me. The weight substantial, but not heavy. Quality wool, the kind that would last decades if properly cared for. Giuseppe circled me with pins and measuring tape, making tiny adjustments that probably mattered more to him than anyone else. Perfect through the shoulders, he murmured. The chest, excellent. Now the trousers. I stepped into the matching pants, watching myself transform in the 3-way mirror. This wasn't the guy who crawled through attics and diagnosed compressor failures. This was someone else entirely, someone who belonged in places like Giuseppe's shop. Quarter-inch shorter, Kim said, studying the trouser break. What do you think, Giuseppe? Ah, yes, the lady has the good eye. Giuseppe marked the hem with chalk, his movements precise as a surgeon's. 5 minutes for the adjustment, then we are finished. He disappeared into his back workshop, leaving me standing in the jacket and my work pants. Kim returned to her chair, scrolling through her phone with that focused intensity she brought to everything. 6 weeks, she said without looking up. Catering confirmed, flowers ordered, church reserved. Everything has to be perfect. I loosened the jacket slightly, feeling oddly constricted despite the perfect fit. The interior pocket felt stiff against my ribs, not the soft silk lining I'd expected. I ran my hand along the inside seam, feeling something that didn't belong. The pocket feels weird, I said, like there's something sewn into the lining. Kim glanced up briefly. Probably just the interfacing. Giuseppe knows what he's doing. Her attention returned to her phone, fingers moving across the screen with practiced efficiency. But I knew interfacing. I knew how fabric was supposed to feel, how things were supposed to fit together. This wasn't right. Something small and hard pressed against the silk lining, something that definitely wasn't supposed to be there. I should have trusted that feeling. Should have investigated right then, used the diagnostic skills that never failed me at work. But I didn't. I stood there in my perfect wedding suit, ignoring the evidence my hands were trying to give me, while Kim planned our future with the same meticulous control she brought to everything else. The workshop door opened, and Giuseppe emerged with my adjusted trousers, smiling like a man proud of his craft. Beautiful work, Giuseppe said, holding up the perfectly hemmed trousers. Now you try the complete ensemble. I stepped into the trousers, pulling them up over the jacket. The fabric moved like liquid, every line falling exactly where it should. Giuseppe fastened the waistband, adjusted the suspenders, stepped back to admire his handiwork. Magnifico, he breathed. You look like different man, Mr. Hank. He was right. The guy staring back from the 3-way mirror belonged in boardrooms, not boiler rooms. The charcoal wool caught the light perfectly, the cut making my shoulders look broader, my frame more commanding. But that damn stiffness in the interior pocket kept nagging at me. I ran my fingers along the silk lining again, pressing against the hard object. Giuseppe, there's something in this pocket that doesn't feel right. Kim's head snapped up from her phone, her expression suddenly alert. Her fingers stopped moving across the screen. What do you mean? Right here. I pressed my palm against the spot. Feels like something's sewn into the lining. Hard, maybe an inch square. Giuseppe frowned, his professional pride clearly concerned. He approached me, his experienced fingers probing the interior pocket with the same precision he used for everything else. His weathered hands traced the lining, pressing, feeling. That is unusual, he admitted, his accent thickening with concentration. This should be only silk, nothing more. Kim stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. She moved closer, her heels clicking sharp against the wood. It's probably just extra padding for structure, she suggested quickly, her voice pitched higher than normal. You know, to keep the pockets shape. Giuseppe shook his head slowly, his fingers still working the fabric. No, this is not my work. I know every stitch in this jacket. Something has been added. The elderly tailor moved to his workbench, reaching for a small leather case. He opened it, revealing an array of seam rippers and precision tools. His movements were careful, deliberate, like a surgeon preparing for an operation. Kim stepped forward, her hand reaching toward Giuseppe's arm. Maybe we should just leave it, she said, her usual composure cracking slightly. It's not bothering anyone. The suit fits perfectly. But Giuseppe ignored her suggestion, his craftsman's integrity demanding investigation. He selected a thin seam ripper, testing its sharpness against his thumb. In 50 years, I never leave mystery in my work. We find what this is. I watched Kim's face as Giuseppe positioned the tool against the interior seam. She'd gone pale, her carefully applied makeup suddenly looking stark against her skin. Her hands clenched at her sides, knuckles white. With surgical precision, Giuseppe opened a small section of the interior lining. The silk parted cleanly, revealing the jacket's internal structure. He worked slowly, his movements reverent, like he was handling something sacred. Madonna mia, he whispered. His fingers extracted something that shouldn't be there, something small, black, made of hard plastic. No bigger than a matchbox, but clearly electronic. Tiny LED indicators dotted one side, and what appeared to be a charging port sat on the other. The object was clearly some kind of tracking device. The workshop fell silent except for the tick of an antique clock on Giuseppe's desk. The weight of discovery settled over us like dust motes in afternoon light. I stared at the device in Giuseppe's palm, my technical background immediately recognizing the components. GPS antenna, cellular transmitter, battery indicator showing full charge, professional-grade equipment. Kim's face drained of color as Giuseppe held the device up to the light, examining it with the same attention he'd give a flawed diamond. The old tailor turned it over in his weathered hands, studying the construction. This is GPSTracker, Giuseppe said definitively, his years of handling electronics for the shop's security system evident in his assessment. Professional grade, very expensive, not toy. I stared at the device, then at Kim, pieces clicking together in my methodical mind like components in a control system. All those times she'd known exactly where I'd been. Her uncanny knowledge of my service routes, my timing, which clients I'd visited. You had Giuseppe sew a tracking device into my wedding suit? The question hung in the air like smoke from a bad electrical connection. Kim opened her mouth, closed it, her carefully constructed explanations crumbling before she could voice them. Her hands trembled slightly, the first crack in her perfect composure I'd seen in months. Giuseppe set the device on his workbench with the reverence of handling evidence. His weathered hands shook slightly as he placed it next to his measuring tape and chalk. Miss Kim, she pay me extra $500, he admitted reluctantly, his accent heavy with shame. She say is for surprise, for safety. I think maybe emergency beacon for wedding day. The old tailor looked between Kim and me, understanding dawning in his eyes like sunrise. I am so sorry, Mr. Hank. I never know this was... He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Kim finally found her voice, though it came out smaller than usual. Hank, I can explain. It's not what you think. I carefully took the GPS device from Giuseppe's workbench. My HVAC technician's hands remained steady, despite the emotional earthquake happening inside my chest. The device was warm, actively transmitting, its tiny LED blinking green every few seconds like a heartbeat. I thought about all the times Kim seemed to know exactly where I'd been, how she'd casually mention the Mexican restaurant on 5th Street where I'd grabbed lunch, or ask how Mrs. Patterson's furnace repair went, jobs I'd never told her about. How long? I asked quietly, my voice controlled but dangerous. Kim wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking very small in Giuseppe's elegant shop. The afternoon light streaming through the windows seemed harsh now, exposing every line of stress around her eyes. Hank, please, let me explain everything. You don't understand the whole situation. Giuseppe's weathered fingers traced the microscopic stitching around the GPS device with practiced precision. The afternoon light catches the silver thread, and I can see how perfectly it matches the original construction. This wasn't added later, Hank. His voice carries decades of tailoring experience. Look at these seams. They match the original construction thread perfectly. Whoever did this planned it from the beginning. The workshop suddenly feels cramped. Bolts of fabric tower around us like witnesses to this betrayal. The smell of wool and starch that usually comforts me now makes my stomach turn. I watch Giuseppe's expert hands examine the installation, his magnifying glass revealing the professional craftsmanship that went into hiding this thing in my suit. She ordered this when she commissioned the suit, I realize aloud. January. She's been planning this for 8 months. Giuseppe nods grimly. The lady, she was very specific about the interior pocket construction. Said it was for surprise. I thought maybe she hid love note or something romantic. He shakes his head. This is not romantic. I carefully extract the TrackMate Pro 3000 from the suit lining, my HVAC training kicking in as I examine the technical specifications. The device is smaller than a matchbox, but feels substantial in my palm. Professional-grade equipment, not some cheap spy store gadget. This is commercial-grade equipment, I mutter, recognizing the model from security catalogs I've seen at industrial sites. The same systematic approach I use diagnosing heating systems takes over. Check the connections, identify the components, understand the system. Giuseppe watches nervously as I turn the device over in my hands. You know this thing? TrackMate Pro 3000. Real-time GPS with cellular data transmission. This runs about $400. The weight of it seems heavier than physics allows, loaded with months of secret surveillance. Battery life of 6 months with daily transmission. My hands remain steady despite the betrayal burning in my chest. 23 years of marriage to my tools has taught me to compartmentalize when working with delicate equipment. But this isn't a broken compressor or faulty thermostat. This is my life, dissected and monitored like a lab experiment. I need to see what's on this thing, I tell Giuseppe. Back in my van, I connect the GPS module to my diagnostic laptop, using standard data cables for my toolkit. The familiar hum of electronic equipment provides odd comfort. At least technology still makes sense when people don't. My laptop screen flickers to life, USB ports recognizing the device immediately. The van's cramped interior feels like a mobile command center. Toolboxes and equipment manuals surround me, while file directories populate on screen. This is my element: cables, data streams, diagnostic readouts. If Kim wanted to spy on a technician, she picked the wrong guy to underestimate. Location history. 247 days of data. The interface displays in clinical blue text. 247 days. That's every single day since she ordered this suit. Every morning coffee run, every service call, every lunch break. My life reduced to GPS coordinates and timestamps. The first week's data loads, and Kim's obsession reveals itself in stark detail. Every work call documented with precise coordinates and timestamps. 7:23 a.m., Martinez residence departure. 7:41 a.m., first service call, Maple Street. 9:15 a.m., hardware store stop, 12 minutes. 11:30 a.m., second service call, Oak Avenue. My jaw tightens as I scroll through hundreds of entries. She knew exactly where I was during every lunch break, every overtime call, every stop for parts. The van's air conditioning hums while I process the scope of her surveillance. She'd been watching me like a security system monitors a building, motion sensors tracking every movement. Jesus, I whisper to the empty van. But it gets worse. A pattern emerges that makes my blood run cold. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon shows extended stops at the same address, Elena's house. My sister who'd warned me about Kim's controlling behavior months ago. The timestamps reveal Kim tracked these visits down to the minute. Elena Martinez residence. 47 visits. Average duration 1.2 hours. She'd been monitoring my conversations with my own sister. Every time Elena expressed concern about Kim's behavior, every family dinner where we talked privately, Kim knew about all of it. The irony tastes bitter in my mouth. Elena had been right about Kim, and Kim had been documenting the evidence of Elena being right. I scroll through more data. Hardware store stops tracked, gas station visits logged, even my route to Giuseppe's shop for suit fittings. All of it recorded, time-stamped, filed away like service records. My phone buzzes. I need to call Elena. Remember when you said Kim always seemed to know things about our conversations? I keep my voice carefully controlled, the same tone I use explaining complex HVAC problems to customers. She's been tracking me, Elena. GPS device in my wedding suit. The silence stretches across the connection. I can hear Elena's nurse training kicking in, that pause she takes before delivering difficult news to patients. Jesus, Hank. Her sharp intake of breath crackles through the speaker. I knew something was off when she'd make comments about things we discussed privately. Like when I mentioned your overtime schedule, and she already knew which neighborhoods you'd been working. The afternoon heat builds in the van despite the air conditioning. My hands are starting to sweat against the laptop keyboard. How long have you suspected? Months. She dropped these little comments. Oh, Hank mentioned you two talked about the wedding budget. Except you never mentioned talking to me about the budget. I thought maybe you just forgot telling her. I never forgot. The data on my screen tells the real story. Every visit to Elena's house documented. Every conversation potentially monitored. She's been building a surveillance network around my entire life. Elena's voice drops to that protective tone she uses with family. Hank, this isn't normal relationship behavior. This is stalking. The data reveals Kim's systematic approach, like reading diagnostic logs from a malfunctioning system. I scroll through the tracking history, and my technical mind can't help but appreciate the thoroughness, even as it makes me sick. She'd screenshot my location 89 times over the past 4 months, building a comprehensive database of my daily patterns. Every client address cataloged, every lunch spot documented, every brief stop at the hardware store logged with military precision. The laptop screen glows in the darkening van as I realize she'd been treating our relationship like an investigation, building a case file on my life. Riverside Elementary, a C unit repair, 2.3 hours. Martinez Plumbing Supply, 14 minutes. Subway on 5th Street, 23 minutes. She knew my work schedule better than Marcus at dispatch. My methodical nature recognizes another methodical mind at work, and that recognition twists in my gut like a wrench in the wrong direction. But then I find something that stops me cold. The GPS coordinates show Kim's own location data. 3 separate occasions where she followed me physically. The timestamps don't lie. Her car positioned within 200 yards of my work sites, tracking my movements in real time. She didn't trust the device enough, I whispered to the empty van. March 15th. Kim's phone at the Starbucks across from the office complex where I was replacing a rooftop unit. I remember that job. Took 6 hours because the previous contractor had botched the installation. She'd been watching me work from her car, probably with binoculars. April 22nd. Her location pings from the parking lot of a strip mall while I was servicing the dental office next door. I'd grabbed lunch at the deli afterward, and she would have seen me eating alone, checking my phone, completely unaware of her surveillance. May 8th, the worst one. She'd parked at the elementary school while I worked on their gymnasium HVAC system. Watched me interact with the maintenance staff, probably photographed me talking to the female secretary who helped me access the building. The violation feels deeper now, not just digital surveillance, but physical stalking. My hands shake slightly as I save the evidence to multiple backup drives. One for my laptop, one for Elena, one hidden in my toolbox. I need to see this through. Need to understand the full scope. I drive to Kim's apartment complex, the weight of evidence heavy in my laptop bag. The evening air carries the smell of cooling asphalt and distant barbecue smoke. Normal people living normal lives, while mine unravels in spreadsheets and GPS coordinates. But arriving at her building, I spot Derek Valdez's distinctive red Camaro in the parking lot. The personal trainer from FitZone Gym, whose name appeared on Kim's hidden credit card statements. My stomach drops like a failed pressure test. Through her second-floor window, I can see them together on her couch. Kim's laptop open between them, the blue glow illuminating both their faces. They're leaning close, pointing at the screen, and I realize with sickening clarity, they're probably reviewing my tracking data together. My surveillance has become their entertainment. I retreat to my van, hands trembling as the full scope hits me. Kim hasn't just been tracking me. She's been sharing my movements with Derek, turning their affair into a collaborative operation. The evening air feels thick, oppressive. as I sit in the parking lot watching my fiance and her lover analyze my life like a science project. My methodical mind struggles to process the emotional chaos. Systems have logical failures. People are messier. Then a horrifying thought strikes me. What if Kim suspects I know? I quickly check the GPS device's transmission history on my phone. The signal went dark at 3:47 p.m. when Giuseppe removed it from my suit jacket. If Kim monitors the tracking app regularly, and the data suggests she checks it obsessively, she'll notice my location stopped updating 3 hours ago. My technical background tells me she'll investigate the dead zone. She'll call, she'll probe. She might even drive to Giuseppe's shop to see what happened. The hunter might become the hunted. As if summoned by my paranoia, my phone buzzes with a text from Kim. "Hey babe, your location stopped updating around 3 p.m. Is everything okay with your phone?" My blood runs cold. She's already noticed the GPS silence. She's testing me, probing to see if I know about the tracking. The message feels calculated, casual enough to seem like normal concern, but specific enough to gauge my reaction. My fingers hover over the keyboard. One wrong word, and she'll know I've discovered her surveillance network. The wedding is in 3 days, and now I'm racing against Kim's suspicions while she holds all the technological advantages. I craft my response carefully. "Battery died during the Henderson job. Charging in the van now. Long day. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow." The lie tastes metallic in my mouth, but it buys me time. Time to plan. Time to decide how to use this evidence. Because now I know exactly what kind of woman I was about to marry. I watched Kim and Derek through her apartment window for another 10 minutes, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. They were hunched over her laptop like a couple of kids playing video games, except their entertainment was my life. Derek pointed at something on the screen and Kim laughed, actually laughed, at whatever violation of my privacy they were reviewing. My phone buzzed. Another text from Kim. "Everything okay? Your location stopped updating at 3 p.m. Just checking." The casual emoji made my stomach turn. She was monitoring me in real time while pretending to be a concerned fiancé. I typed back, "Phone died. Charging now. See you tomorrow." Let her think the GPS was just a dead battery. I needed time to plan. I drove home in silence, my mind racing through possibilities. Back in my apartment, I spread the printed screenshots across my kitchen table. All 89 images showing my van's movements tracked to the minute. The fluorescent light above buzzed as I arranged them chronologically, my half-training kicking in like I was diagnosing a complex system failure. The pattern that emerged made my blood run cold. November 18th. Kim had cornered me after dinner, voice tight with accusation. "You said you'd be home by 5. Where were you really?" I'd explained about the emergency call, the broken compressor at the office building on 5th Street. She'd acted hurt, like I was hiding something. But here was the GPS data showing she'd watched me service that exact building for 2 hours. She knew exactly where I was while pretending to doubt me. December 3rd, same pattern. She'd questioned my overtime while the tracking data showed her monitoring me service 3 different office buildings. "I just worry when you're out so late," she'd said, tears in her eyes. Crocodile tears, I realize now. She was creating problems she was already solving. January 15th. The day she'd accused me of being secretive about my schedule. The GPS showed I'd grabbed lunch at Subway on Maple Street. She knew my exact location down to the restaurant booth, but still played the wounded girlfriend routine that evening. I leaned back in my kitchen chair, the evidence spread before me like a technical manual for manipulation. Every fight, every accusation, every moment she'd made me feel guilty for having a life. She'd orchestrated it all while holding the remote control to my movements. My phone rang. Marcus Chen from Dispatch. "Hey, Hank, weird question. You asked me to verify some dates earlier. Everything all right?" I pulled up the November 18th screenshot. "Yeah, just double-checking. That emergency call on 5th Street. You said it took me 2 hours?" "Yeah, the whole HVAC system was shot. Customer was pissed because their server room was overheating. You had to rebuild half the ductwork." Marcus paused. "Why? Someone questioning your hours?" The irony hit me like a wrench to the gut. "Something like that. Well, the logs don't lie. You were there from 2:47 p.m. to 4:52 p.m. Saved their ass, too. That server room would have been toast without you. Thanks, Marcus. You sure you're okay? You sound just wetting nerves, I lied, staring at Kim's tracking data that proved she'd monitored every minute of that call. After I hung up, I sat in the buzzing fluorescent light, cross-referencing dates with her accusations. The evidence was ironclad. Kim had created a relationship where I was always the suspect and she was always the victim, all while holding the surveillance footage that proved my innocence. My phone buzzed again. Kim. Giuseppe called. Suit's ready. Can't wait to see you in it tomorrow. I stared at that heart emoji until it blurred. She was tracking my location right now through the very suit she was pretending to be excited about. The woman who'd be walking down the aisle tomorrow had been running surveillance on me for 8 months. The heart emoji felt like mockery, love wrapped around a lie. I screenshotted the message and added it to my evidence folder. Outside my window, evening traffic hummed past, people heading home to relationships built on actual trust. Normal couples who didn't need GPS devices to know where their partner was. That's when I made the decision. I opened my laptop and started researching GPS signal manipulation. My technical background guided me through forums and tutorials, the same methodical approach I used to diagnose failing HVAC systems. The TrackMate Pro 3000 could be fooled with a simple signal repeater, a device that broadcasts false coordinates while the real GPS stays stationary. I found one on Amazon with overnight shipping for $67. I used our joint checking account to buy it, the bitter irony not lost on me. I was funding my counter-surveillance operation with our wedding budget. Money we'd saved together to start our married life, now being used to expose the lie our relationship had become. My reflection stared back from the laptop screen, stubble growing because I'd been too focused to shave, eyes bloodshot from staring at evidence. Tomorrow, Kim would think I was getting ready at my apartment while I was actually somewhere else entirely. For the first time in months, I'd moved through the world without her digital leash around my neck. The GPS spoofer arrived at 7 a.m., just as promised. I set it up in my bedroom, watching it sync with the TrackMate signal. The little green light blinked steadily. My electronic alibi was active. Elena called while I was testing the device. "You sound different, Hank. What's going on?" I couldn't tell my sister about the tracking device. Not yet. The truth was too complicated, too humiliating. Just wedding nerves. "You sure? You've been distant lately. Ever since..." She paused. "Ever since you started planning this wedding, actually." Through my apartment window, I watched couples walking hand in hand down the street. Their relationships probably built on actual honesty instead of GPS coordinates and surveillance apps. "I'm fine, Elena. Really." But my voice cracked slightly. Tomorrow I was supposed to marry a woman who'd been surveilling me for months, and I was the only one who knew it. "Hank, if something's wrong, I've got to go. Talk to you later." I hung up before she could press further. The GPS spoofer showed Kim's tracking app, placing me at my apartment while I drove across town to Giuseppe's shop. The freedom felt surreal after months of unknowing surveillance. Like taking off shoes that had been too tight for so long, you'd forgotten what comfort felt like. Giuseppe greeted me at his shop door with knowing eyes. "How are you feeling, my friend?" The shop smelled of pressed wool and steam, familiar and comforting after yesterday's revelations. I ran my fingers along the suit jacket's lining where the GPS device was hidden, feeling the slight bulge of the TrackMate Pro 3000. Like I'm seeing clearly for the first time. Giuseppe nodded gravely as he began the final adjustments. Clarity before a wedding. That is either very good or very dangerous. I watched him work, his weathered hands moving with the same precision I brought to HVAC repairs. "What do you think it is in my case?" He paused, needle halfway through the fabric. "That depends on what you plan to do with what you've learned." The weight of the GPS device pressed against my ribs as Giuseppe adjusted the suit jacket's shoulders. Each breath reminded me of Kim's deception, a physical burden I'd been carrying for months without knowing it. The charcoal wool felt perfect against my skin, Giuseppe's craftsmanship flawless, despite the hidden payload. "She paid me extra $500 to install this," Giuseppe admitted quietly, his weathered fingers smoothing the fabric. "I thought maybe surprise for anniversary gift, but..." He trailed off, catching my expression in the three-way mirror. The man staring back looked hollow. wearing a beautiful lie tailored to perfection. Dark circles under my eyes, jaw clenched tight. This suit should have made me feel confident, ready for my wedding day. Instead, it felt like wearing evidence of my own stupidity. But you realized what it really was, I finished. Giuseppe's reflection nodded sadly behind mine. When you showed me the device yesterday, I knew. The way she insisted on that specific pocket, the extra stitching. He shook his head. I should have questioned it more. I turned away from the mirror. You couldn't have known. But the words felt empty. Someone should have known. I should have known. Giuseppe disappeared into his office and returned with a small envelope, yellowed at the edges. The receipt for her special request. She made me promise not to tell you. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside, Kim's careful handwriting filled out a custom order form. Discrete location monitoring device. Must be undetectable during normal wear and cleaning. Her signature looked different than on our wedding invitations. More controlled, calculated, clinical. The date hit me like a punch to the gut. January 15th, 2 months after our engagement. The shop's antique clock ticked loudly in the silence as I processed this premeditated betrayal. She hadn't installed tracking impulsively during some fight about trust. She'd planned this from the beginning, methodically, like a surveillance operation. She never trusted me, I whispered. Giuseppe's weathered hand squeezed my shoulder. I am sorry, my friend. If I'd known what this would do to you, it's not your fault. I folded the receipt carefully, adding it to my growing collection of evidence. You were just doing your job. But as I changed back into my regular clothes, the suit hanging on Giuseppe's rack like an expensive lie, I realized Kim had turned everyone into unwitting accomplices. Giuseppe with his craftsmanship. Marcus dispatching me to jobs she could track. Even Elena, whose warnings I dismissed because Kim always seemed to know exactly what my sister had said. Walking home in the evening air, my phone buzzed constantly with Kim's texts about wedding logistics. Be at church by 10 a.m. sharp. Don't forget the rings are in your jacket pocket. Can't wait to see you at the altar. Tomorrow's going to be perfect. Each message felt like manipulation disguised as excitement. She wasn't planning our future. She was orchestrating my movements with military precision. The evening air was crisp against my face as the full scope of her deception crystallized. Her insistence on managing every wedding detail wasn't love. It was control. Even our wedding day timeline served her surveillance needs. I stopped walking, pulling out my phone to scroll through her messages from the past week. Every instruction, every reminder, every suggestion about timing suddenly made sense. She wanted me tracked and monitored while saying, I do. The GPS device would record our entire wedding day, the drive to church, the ceremony, the reception. She'd have digital proof of every moment of what should have been the most intimate day of our lives. Back home, I spread Kim's meticulously planned wedding timeline across my kitchen table, alongside printouts of the GPS tracking data. Every scheduled moment told a story of surveillance. Photos at 9 a.m. at Riverside Gardens. She knew I always arrived 15 minutes early to scout parking. Ceremony at 11 a.m. at St. Anthony's. She'd track me driving there 3 times during rehearsals, timing every route. Reception at 2 p.m. back at Riverside Gardens. She had the exact coordinates of where I'd parked for the venue tour. The wedding wasn't a celebration of our love. It was the culmination of her surveillance project. My hands shook slightly as I realized she'd been planning to monitor me through our entire marriage. The honeymoon itinerary, she'd insisted on planning herself. The new house she wanted to buy in our name. The joint bank accounts she'd suggested we consolidate. Every major life decision would give her more control, more ways to track my movements and monitor my choices. I picked up my phone and dialed Father Rodriguez. Everything set for tomorrow, Father? His warm voice carried through the phone like a lifeline. Of course, my son. Are you ready for this blessed union? The word blessed stuck in my throat. How could a marriage built on secret surveillance be blessed? How could I stand before God and promise to love someone who'd never trusted me enough to stop tracking my movements? Actually, Father, there might be some complications tomorrow. Silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken questions. Would you like to talk about it, Hank? Sometimes pre-wedding anxiety can feel overwhelming, but I think I need to handle this myself. I stared at the GPS device evidence spread across my table. Screenshots of tracking data, Giuseppe's receipt, the timeline that revealed 8 months of systematic surveillance. Tomorrow, Kim would expect to see me walk down that aisle wearing the suit she'd turned into a tracking device, following the schedule she'd designed around her surveillance data. I understand, Father Rodriguez said gently. But remember, my son, marriage is about forgiveness as much as love. Whatever troubles you're facing, they can be worked through with patience and prayer. After hanging up, I sat in my perfectly tailored suit one more time, surrounded by evidence of months of deception. Kim's tracking app showed me safely at home while I planned tomorrow's confrontation. The GPS spoofer hummed quietly on my desk, my first taste of the freedom she'd been denying me for 8 months. My reflection in the dark window showed a man transformed. No longer the unknowing subject of surveillance, but someone ready to reclaim his autonomy. Tomorrow, Kim would discover that her prey had become the predator. I'd walk into that church with all the evidence she never knew I could gather. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd given me the perfect suit for our wedding day, and unknowingly provided the evidence that would end our engagement forever. I stood in the church preparation room at 6:47 a.m., my perfectly tailored suit fitting like armor against what was coming. The charcoal fabric Giuseppe had crafted with such care now felt heavy with irony, every stitch a reminder of the deception woven into its very fibers. Morning light streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colored shadows across the polished wooden table where I'd laid out my evidence. The door opened. Kim entered in her silk robe, hair already styled in that perfect updo she'd planned for months. She expected nervous groom jitters, maybe a reassuring kiss before the ceremony. Instead, she found me placing my phone on the table, GPS coordinates glowing on the screen. September 14th, 6:15 a.m., St. Anthony's preparation room. Accuracy, 3 meters. My voice came out steady, clinical, the same tone I used when reading diagnostic data to clients. Kim's eyes fixed on the phone. The TrackMate interface was unmistakable. Those familiar blue dots on the map, the timestamp, the precision that had tracked my every movement for 8 months. Her face drained of color, the expensive foundation suddenly looking like a mask. Hank, what are you... March 15th, Giuseppe's shop, 2:17 p.m. I scrolled through the timeline methodically, each entry a violation cataloged with technical precision. You paid him $500 extra to install this. I held up the GPS module, its plastic casing catching the morning light. Every client call, every lunch break, every visit to Elena's house, all of it. The preparation room's silence amplified every word. Outside, I could hear early guests arriving, their cheerful voices a stark contrast to the clinical dissection happening inside. Carmen's laugh echoed from the church steps, my mother probably greeting relatives who'd driven hours to see her son get married. Kim sank into the velvet chair beside the window, her hands shaking. Hank, I can explain. Can you? I pulled the phone back as she reached for it. Because I've got 247 days of data here. Want to explain why you tracked me buying lunch at the same deli for 3 years? Or why you knew I visited Elena every Sunday at 2 p.m.? I showed her the coordinates for Elena's house. Dozens of entries, perfectly timed. The irony wasn't lost on me. My sister had warned me about Kim's controlling nature 6 months ago, sitting in her kitchen while I insisted Kim was just organized, just careful. She watches you like a hawk, Elena had said. I'd defended Kim then. Now those words felt prophetic. It was for your safety. Kim's voice rose with desperation, cracking slightly. I worried about you driving alone to dangerous neighborhoods. Those HVAC calls, some of those areas, my laugh came out bitter, hollow in the sacred space. You tracked me to Giuseppe's shop. You tracked me to the grocery store. You tracked me to church, Kim. What danger was I in buying communion wine for Father Rodriguez? The weight of betrayal settled over me like a heavy blanket. Each piece of evidence I'd gathered over the past 3 days now felt like ammunition in a war I'd never wanted to fight. But my technical mind couldn't stop analyzing, couldn't stop presenting the data with the same methodical precision I used on faulty heating systems. You scheduled our engagement dinner for September 15th, 2018. I scrolled to the beginning of the timeline. The GPS orders are dated September 20th. 5 days later, Kim. You were already planning to track me before we'd even finished celebrating. Her tears started then, smearing the carefully applied makeup her wedding artist had finished an hour ago. The morning sun climbed higher through the stained glass, painting her face in fragments of red and blue light. Somewhere in the church, Father Rodriguez was probably wondering where the groom was. Time was running out for our scheduled 9 a.m. ceremony. "We can work through this." Kim grabbed my arm, her manicured nails pressing into the suit fabric. "Everyone makes mistakes. We can get counseling. This wasn't a mistake." I gently removed her hand from my sleeve, the charcoal wool Giuseppe had so carefully tailored. "This was a system, Kim. Systematic surveillance. You didn't trust me enough to ask where I was going, so you just watched." The suit that was meant to be my wedding armor had become evidence of betrayal. Through the preparation room window, I could see wedding guests gathering on the church steps. Marcus from work adjusting his tie, Elena shepherding Sophia in her flower girl dress, relatives who traveled from 3 states to see us exchange vows. Kim's desperation peaked as reality set in. "You're not going to marry me, are you?" Her voice came out small, defeated, all the fight suddenly gone. I straightened my tie, the same motion I'd made 1,000 times before work calls, but now it felt final, like putting on equipment for a job I'd never wanted to take. I can't marry someone who never trusted me enough to ask where I was going. The silence stretched between us like a broken circuit. Kim's makeup ran in dark streams down her cheeks, and I could smell her expensive perfume mixed with the old wood and incense of the church. My hands found the door handle, cold brass against my palm. "Hank, please!" I stopped but didn't turn around. The suit felt different now, not like wedding attire, but like evidence. Like the contaminated components I'd tag and bag for warranty claims. "I'm keeping this," I said, gesturing to Giuseppe's masterwork. The charcoal wool, the perfect stitching, the hidden GPS that had recorded 247 days of my life. For the lawyer. Kim nodded mutely, understanding finally hitting her like a system failure. This wasn't just about the GPS device anymore. This was about contracts, spoken and unspoken, legal and emotional. Some violations can't be repaired with apologies and promises. The morning light had shifted, casting longer shadows across the preparation room. In 2 hours, this space was supposed to witness final preparations for a lifetime commitment. Instead, it had become a crime scene of trust. I pulled out my phone. Father Rodriguez answered on the second ring. "Father, it's Hank Martinez. The wedding is canceled." My voice stayed steady, the same tone I used explaining furnace repairs to confused homeowners. "Keep the deposits." "My son, are you certain?" "Yes, Father. Thank you for everything." Next call, Riverside Gardens Event Center. The manager's voice was professionally sympathetic as I explained. $18,500 in non-refundable payments. The financial cost stung like touching a live wire, but the alternative cost would have been higher. Kim sat silently in her wedding dress, still beautiful, still wrong. The preparation room had become a business office where contracts were dissolved and futures recalculated. My phone buzzed. Elena. "I'm outside." My sister's voice came through calm and controlled. "I brought you regular clothes." She appeared in the doorway 20 minutes later, her nurse's training evident in how she handled the crisis. No drama, no questions, just efficient problem solving. "The guests are being informed," Elena said, setting a canvas bag on the wooden table. "Carmen is handling the family calls." Kim looked up hopefully, as if Elena might somehow fix this, but my sister's expression remained professionally neutral. Elena had warned me about Kim's controlling behavior months ago. She'd seen the pattern before I had. I changed out of the suit carefully in the small adjoining room, hanging Giuseppe's work with the respect it deserved. The GPS device was still in there, still tracking, still evidence. Each piece of the suit came off like removing contaminated gear after a hazmat call. Elena helped Kim gather her things without judgment, just efficient crisis management. The wedding dress rustled like autumn leaves as Kim stood, looking around the preparation room one last time. "I really did love you," Kim whispered as she passed me. I nodded. "I know. That's what makes this worse." 3 weeks later, I sat in my lawyer's office on Maple Street, the suit hanging in a garment bag beside the mahogany desk. The GPS device had been extracted and documented, its data preserved on multiple drives like backup systems. "She can't claim any of the joint account funds," the lawyer explained, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. The tracking evidence establishes a pattern of deceptive behavior that voids her claim to marital assets. I nodded, my technical mind appreciating the legal precision. The $23,400 in our joint account remained untouched. Kim hadn't tried to access it. Perhaps she understood that some debts can't be paid with money. Giuseppe called on a Thursday afternoon while I was diagnosing a commercial HVAC system at the downtown medical complex. His accent was thick with regret. "I wanted to apologize again," the master tailor said. "I should have told you immediately when she asked for the modification." I paused my work, multimeter still in hand, readings stable on the display. "You did what you were paid to do, Giuseppe. The fault wasn't in the craftsmanship." There was a long silence, filled only by the hum of the building's ventilation system. "The suit still fits perfectly," I added. "It's evidence now, but when this is over, it's still the best work you've ever done." Giuseppe's relief was audible through the phone. Some professional relationships survive even the worst circumstances. Trust, once broken, could sometimes be rebuilt with honesty and time. 6 months later, I wore the suit to Elena's wedding. The GPS device was long gone, extracted and filed away with court documents. But the suit remained Giuseppe's masterpiece. The charcoal wool felt the same against my shoulders, but I felt different wearing it. As Elena walked down the aisle of Sacred Heart Chapel in her flowing white dress, I thought about contracts, the legal ones that could be broken with paperwork, and the emotional ones that healed with time and honest communication. My phone buzzed with a work call. Another furnace needed diagnosis. Another system required repair. I silenced it respectfully, keeping my eyes on my sister's radiant smile. Some things were more important than being constantly available. Some surveillance was necessary, like monitoring system pressure and temperature, and some wasn't. The difference I'd learned was trust. Elena's new husband looked at her the way I'd once looked at Kim, with complete faith.